What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined by Matt Moreno, a.k.a. the two guys that have done good service to the team by picking against them in must-win games, knowing that reverses things and actually causes them to win. So, Matt, thanks for being here. Today, we're talking about a big storyline for the Dodgers heading into Game 6, which is the bullpen. Joe Kelly comes out of the game last night with bicep issues. It's announced last night that he would be done for the remainder of the playoffs. David Price taking his spot on the roster. There's also news about Justin Bruihl, who was supposed to pitch last night and was unable to. So we'll get to that in a moment. But let's start with David Price replacing Joe Kelly. When you first saw this, I don't think anyone was surprised that Price would be the guy. But what's your reaction about David Price and confidence level in his ability to pitch this postseason?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I think that was kind of a shoe-in. He was the obvious choice even before Dave Roberts said, or sort of acknowledged that he was at the top of the list. Uh, some of it is the Dodgers aren't really flush in very many options
Yeah.
right now. Really, in any, even on the position player side, we see Andy Burns is up now for Justin Turner. Um, it makes sense also from a strategy standpoint with the simple fact that David Price throws with his left hand.
Yeah.
The Braves have, for obviously, Freddie Freeman. Dodgers are trying to keep Ozzie Albies batting, on the right side. Or excuse me, or is it? No, I may have confused myself now.
Yeah. But getting Eddie Rosario out there as well.
Yes, there you go. That's who I meant. Price had kind of an up and down season. I think he deserves some credit for being willing to take on any role. And he, going back to before spring training, went to Andrew Friedman and said, "Hey, if you need to put me in the bullpen so some of these younger guys can get into the rotation, like I'll do it." And I think that brought some value to the team. I think once he started to settle into a relief role, and the results were showing that. But then because of all the injuries, he had to go back to kind of starting,
Yeah.
and he was kind of caught in between of needing to stretch out while also, sort of being effective because the Dodgers needed to win games, obviously. Then he dealt with some elbow issues last month that impacted him. So he's a little bit of an unknown in that sense, is that
Yeah.
you're maybe not sure what you're going to get. He was on the roster for the NLDS, didn't pitch. I think honestly we could end up in a similar situation now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this with David Price. There's the optimistic side of me and the pessimistic side of me. I'll start with the pessimistic side. David Price has thrown in one major league game since September 29th, and that was not entirely due to injury or anything. That was mostly because the Dodgers were not using him in games where they wanted to win. He had 6 1/3 innings pitched in September and October. Yes, that's right. Just 6 innings pitched in both September and into the month of October. He allowed 4 earned runs and 16 base runners in those 6 innings and just struck out 3. He's had the worst strikeout rate of his career this season, the worst walk rate of his career in the past 11 seasons. This is a guy who's getting up there in age, who didn't pitch in 2020. You could connect the dots, okay? That's the pessimistic side. Here's the optimistic side. He's a lefty. He's a lefty. The Braves are 25th in weighted runs created plus against left-handed pitching this year. So if you had to choose between a lefty and a righty, you would prefer to take a lefty. This is a guy who's been there before. I think that's the headline. This is a guy who's been in the big moments, who's trusted, who's a veteran, who's not going to be afraid. We're going to talk about some names, Mitch White, Andre Jackson, etc. You don't know how those guys would respond to a big moment. If Price, for some reason, has to be in a big moment, he's not going to be scared. Whether he's going to be good is a whole nother question, but he won't be scared. John Weissman pointed this one out. If you look at his splits in close games versus blowouts and high leverage spots versus low leverage, there's some encouragement there. In games in which there has been a margin of more than 4 runs between the two teams, he's allowed an OPS of almost 1.1, so he's been terrible in blowouts. But in games where the margin is less than 4, his OPS is about 400 points lower. In high leverage spots, his OPS is 539 versus low leverage spots 862. Now you might say, hey Jeff, he's only going to be pitching in low leverage spots. True, but maybe the postseason just feels like high leverage spots to David Price. So all that to say, you and I both agree on this. He's probably not pitching. Like if David Price appears in either of the next 2 games, if there are 2 games, it would be in the 14th inning of a game where it's like, hey David, here's the ball. You're going to keep pitching until somebody scores, either us or them, but you're not coming out of the game. Like that's going to be the only scenario. Now, maybe he's slightly ahead of Tony Gonsolin based on how poor Tony Gonsolin has pitched. I don't know. But the point is, these guys aren't going to see leverage options. leverage opportunities, I should say. Which brings me to the second piece of the conversation, because last night, Kenley Jansen comes in the ninth inning, and everybody's like, why is Jansen coming in a 9-run game? We criticized him on our show afterwards, and yet it comes out after the game in his press conference. He points out that Justin Bruihl was supposed to pitch in last night's game, but was unavailable. He tried to stretch out, had some arm soreness, and now in his press conference says, hey, we don't know if Bruhl's going to be available, so we're bringing a pitcher with us just in case Bruhl can't make it, just in case he also needs to be replaced. Now, the options for that are as follows. Left-handers, you've got Victor Gonzalez, Darian Nunez, and Andrew Vasquez. Yes, that's a real player that pitches for the Dodgers, Andrew Vasquez. On the right-handed side, you've got Mitch White and Andre Jackson. Dave Roberts has said they're looking at both lefties and righties to replace Bruhl, presumably because Price is a lefty. The other guy that's worth considering that Justin Lorber has mentioned is Garrett Clevenger, who is a left-handed pitcher who's on rehab assignment, technically, but he's not on the 40-man roster, so they would need to clear a spot for him. So let me run through some of these names real quick because there's interesting ones on here. I think Victor Gonzalez is the name that probably catches some attention. In the major leagues this year, he had a 1.44 whip. He walked 19 guys in 35 innings. He was not very good. The good news is he went down to AAA, and in September and October, 8 1/3 innings pitched, just 2 earned runs, 9 base runners allowed, 12 strikeouts. So good, solid end to the season of Victor Gonzalez. Not good enough to get him a spot on the NLDS, but he's being considered. Then you've got Nunez as a guy I think a lot of people are intrigued with. The major league numbers, really bad. 8.22 ERA in 6 appearances, a whip of almost 1.6, and 8 strikeouts in 7 2/3. The flip side on the at the AAA level in September and October, 11 1/3 innings pitched, just 7 base runners allowed, no earned runs, and 19 strikeouts. So no earned runs, 11 1/3. Left-handed pitcher, looks nice. Vasquez, we'll just mention for the sake of giving him a shout out. 6 innings pitched in the last couple months at AAA, 6 hits, 2 walks, 11 strikeouts, 2 earned runs. He does have a perfect 0.00 ERA at the major league level, 1 2/3 innings pitched. He, of course, was in that, the game that never ended against the Padres. Andre Jackson and Mitch White are the right-handers. Both guys similar. Andre Jackson struggled at AAA down the stretch, 14 earned runs in his last 21 1/3 innings pitched there. He allowed 32 base runners and just 20 strikeouts. So tough one for him. He was pretty good at the major league level. White was good at the major league level and has been good at the AAA level. 7 innings pitched at AAA over the last couple months, 2 hits. Clevenger, it's worth noting, 4 2/3 innings pitched he made on his rehab assignment. He did allow 7 base runners. He did allow 12 earned runs. The guy got 14 outs and 12 of them were strikeouts, though. So if you want to look for positives, that's pretty freaking good. He did struggle at the major league level. The ERA looks good, 6 earned runs in 18 innings pitched, but he did allow 32 base runners in 18 innings. So lots of options there, Matt. I'll let you go wherever you want. Do you care lefty versus righty? Do you want just the best pitcher? Who do you think that is? So.
Yeah, it's for me, it needs to be kind of a balance of everything. And, obviously losing Joe Kelly is significant, but I think the decision on who they choose to replace, if they need to replace Justin Bruihl, I think that will carry, arguably more significance and impact than adding David Price, because like we just said, the odds of Price getting into a game probably aren't very high. Considering that to be the case, my guess is the Dodgers might lean a little bit more left again.
Yeah.
With that, obviously Victor Gonzalez was there last year. He had a huge breakout season, followed that up with this year, struggled. I think, some of it maybe can be attributed to injuries. I think he battled plantar fasciitis and then a knee issue also as well.
Okay.
And like you said, he did finish, albeit in AAA, he did finish the season on a positive note. Clevenger's a little bit of a wild card to me because when they put him on the 60-day IL, Roberts basically said, it does both because of time and just injury, like his season is effectively over.
Yeah.
And then like a week or 10 days later, he started a rehab assignment. And I thought that's strange, but I just honestly assumed it was, hey, like he's healthy enough to kind of keep pitching. We don't want to miss out on this opportunity to continue developing, even if we don't necessarily plan on using him later on down the year. Well, lo and behold, injuries, unpredictable things. Here we are. So I think if I were ranking them, I don't know if I would take a risk on Victor Gonzalez. I think his experience in doing it in the playoffs last year carries some weight.
Yeah.
I would be a little concerned on how he pitched this year. But I think it wouldn't shock me if the decision comes down to Gonzalez, Clevinger, and I think Mitch White.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are the top three. As intriguing as a guy like Darian Nunez is, I think his performance at the big league level is a little worrisome. I don't think Vasquez has a chance, and I think White is a clearly better option than Jackson at this point, just based on how it pitched. Gonzalez is fascinating because I joked last night. I said, hey, all the guys who sucked during the regular season have been amazing during the postseason, so let's just get Gonzalez on the Gratterall, Bellinger, Chris Taylor plan and expect the best there. Mitch White scares me. I mean, I know some people like him, and he pitched better. I would prefer a lefty just because of how bad the Braves are against lefties. And if you're replacing Bruhl, you probably want someone that you trust. Now, albeit based on how things have played out on a timeline, clearly they trust David Price more than they trust all of these guys. So maybe Price would be a lefty ahead of all these guys. But I'm with you. I think Gonzalez and Clevinger are the interesting ones. I'd probably lean Gonzalez because as much as I love the 12 strikeouts out of the last 14 outs for Clevinger, he did allow 7 base runners. He did allow 2 earned runs. And so I think I like Gonzalez there. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully, I think best case scenario is Bruhl's arm feels a lot better tomorrow when he wakes up, and they don't feel like they need to make a roster move at all. So that's the news. I mean, Matt, just since we've got you here, Game 6, the Dodgers, they've been here before. How are you feeling heading back to Atlanta for hopefully 2 straight wins to advance to the World Series again?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some reason for confidence. You know, Game 5 was sort of the hump game.
Yeah.
It was going to, I mean, as you know, I believe it was maybe Cody Bellinger who said, you know, when other teams say, oh, we have to use a bullpen game, it's usually kind of with a little bit of apprehension. But he said, you know, that with us, the Dodgers, like our bullpen has been so strong that we're confident in them.
Yeah.
So Game 5, obviously, no matter how it was going to, the 2 games before it were going to play out, Game 5 was a huge swing game.
Yeah.
And it was just a matter for the Dodgers, obviously, of getting it back to Atlanta because now you have Max Scherzer and Walker Buehler. Things are finally sort of lined up the way you would want it to be if you're the Dodgers. And I think Scherzer is sort of due for kind of a vintage performance that we saw really in his first 9 starts with the Dodgers. And, you know, what was interesting is Dave Roberts was asked today, you know, if the Dodgers were to win Game 6, does that give them, you know, a mental edge going into Game 7 because of the history with the Braves last year? And he said he thinks the Dodgers already have an advantage because they have forced the Game 6 and are flying back to Atlanta with the Braves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we'll see. Like you said, you've got Scherzer on an extra day of rest. You've got Buehler on full rest. You've got to feel good. I mean, the Urias debacle is behind us now. The bullpen game is behind us now. And so everything's in front of them. Like the Dodgers, you know, it's kind of like they've got all their goals are still attainable. And they've got things set up. Like this is exactly how you would draw it up is you want Scherzer and you want Buehler in Game 6 and Game 7. And so here we are. We'll see. Some big decisions to be made, obviously, with Justin Bruihl and his replacement. And obviously one already made with David Price replacing Joe Kelly. Kelly ineligible to return in the World Series if the Dodgers make it as well. So we shall see. We will be back tomorrow, Daniel and I, with the live pregame show ahead of Game 6. So be sure to join us for that. We'll have a postgame show as well. We don't know the time of that game quite yet, depending on the Red Sox Astros, what they do. If the Red Sox win and force a Game 7, the Dodgers would play at 2:08. If the Astros win and advance to the World Series, the Dodgers would get moved to, I believe, 5:08. So stay tuned on exact timing there, but we will see. Also, as we referenced, Dave Roberts talking about Joe Kelly, talking about David Price, talking about Justin Bruihl. That press conference is up live already on Dodger Blue 1958, the YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out while you're there. Hey, click the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell. We really appreciate it. That's Matt Moreno. I'm Jeff Spiegel. We will see you tomorrow ahead of Game 6. Enjoy your day.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.